My name is Antoinette Van Handel du Chateau Crump, but you can call me Nettie. I was born in 1863, and I was the oldest of 9 children. My parents' names are Arnold and Mary Van Handel. They were not originally from America. My father was born in the Netherlands, and my mother was born in Belgium. When they were married at that time in the Netherlands, they were experiencing famine, and there was widespread poverty. And so they decided to make the trip to America in search of a better life. They were farmers. And so they traveled here, but they didn't travel together. My father wanted to travel west across the country, looking for some good farmland to settle on. He came by covered wagon train, as a matter of fact. But my mother had heard stories of Indian attacks against white settlers, and she was scared to make that trip. So it was, she boarded a ship and settled around the coast of South America. She met up with my father in San Francisco, and they were apart for several months, as you might imagine. But they ended up settling in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I was born, as well as my siblings. They had heard that there was land available, and they heard of a milder climate and thought that sounded appealing. And at the same time, their friends and fellow farmers, the Kintzes and the Zimmerman family, chose to make that same trip. I was born with a weak leg. The one leg was shorter than the other, and it caused constant pain while I was growing. And so it was, my mother took me to visit a shrine where it was rumored that the Virgin Mary had healed a young girl. There was a priest there who said a prayer over me and a blessing, and I was healed. My pain was gone. My leg still remained shorter than the other, but I was very happy, as you might imagine, to no longer be in pain. I was only able to attend school to the 5th grade because, as the oldest, it became my responsibility to help out with chores around the farm. But I didn't mind. I loved caring for the babies as they came along, and it was very, very good. When I was 30 years old, I met and married a wonderful man, very handsome, very kind. His name was Arthur du Chateau. We had a good marriage. We had 2 children. We had a son. We named him William, and then he was followed by a sweet little baby girl. We named her Josephine. I thought we'd grow old together, but sadly, after only 7 years of marriage, Arthur passed away, leaving me a widow with 2 small children. Prior to my husband's death, my family made the decision to leave Wisconsin and head to the Willamette Valley here in Oregon. They had heard that there was land available, and they heard of a milder climate and thought that sounded appealing. And at the same time, their friends and fellow farmers, the Kintzes and the Zimmerman family, chose to make that same trip. When they came to Oregon, they initially settled in Verboot, which was a small Dutch town near Forest Grove. From there, a young priest visited their church and invited them to join him at his parish in Sublimity, St. Boniface, as a matter of fact. The 3 families pooled their efforts getting ready for winter. They butchered hogs and cattle. It was a family affair. They spent about a week. They canned and preserved the meat and settled in for the winter months. And that was before my Arthur passed. And so Upon learning that, my parents invited me to come and join them here in Sublimity. They said it was a close-knit community and a good place to raise children. I thought that sounded good, and my children and I boarded a train and headed to Oregon, to the Willamette Valley, with little more than the clothes on our backs. It was exciting and terrifying too. The train moved quickly. The facilities on the train were kind of primitive, and the toilet was pretty much a hole that emptied to the tracks below. But we were happy to arrive, and I needed a way to support my children. And so I decided to open a boarding house in the center of town. That was an acceptable occupation for women in those days. I didn't have a lot of education, and I needed a way to care for my children as well. And so that was a good solution. The people that boarded with me became like family. We shared meals together and spent time around the fire in the evenings, and it was a good fit. And I met a man that was one of my boarders. His name was Nettie Crump, and he went by the name of Joe. He was a blacksmith, and he paid me a lot of attention. He set his sights on me, and he wooed me. That's what we would say back in the day. And the problem was he could also be moody. As a matter of fact, my parents advised me not to marry him. They didn't think that was a good idea. But I was lonely, and I didn't take their advice, sorry to say. So Joe and I got married, and his moods got worse in no time at all, and he actually became kind of mean, and he took a dislike to my daughter Josephine, and he actually kicked her out of the house at one point. Well, that could not stand. I persuaded him to see a doctor, and when the doctor examined him, he discovered that he had a bullet in the back of his head lodged against his brain, pressing on the brain, causing the mood swings. And of all things, Joe, at that point, remembered an accident he'd had years ago in which he was shot. And he'd forgotten all about it. Yeah, so what could I say? So we made the best of things, but within a year of our marriage, Joe contracted typhoid fever and died. So here I was, again, a widow with 2 young children to raise, but by this time I lived near my family, and that was a real comfort to me. I'd like to tell you more about my children. What mother doesn't like to talk about her children? William was a very clever young man. He was smart. He was very mechanical. He could fix anything. And he was only able to attend school until the 5th grade. Like me, he quit to work on the family farm, but he was, like I said, very clever. And he grew up to work in a lumber mill. Timber was big around here in those days, and he repaired engines, and he became a Sublimity firefighter. He married his sweetheart, Mary, and they raised 2 sons here in Sublimity. And it was a comfort to have them nearby. My daughter Josephine helped out around the boarding house. She helped with preparing meals and baking. She turned out to be a gifted baker. She made wonderful breads and desserts, and she went on to be a professional baker. She attended school in Staten up to her sophomore year, and then she married a man from Staten whose name was Leo Rock. He was the postal carrier, and he was very well known and very well liked, and I'm very proud of my children. As time went by, my leg started paining me again and bothering me greatly. As a matter of fact, I broke it in a fall, and the doctor said it could not be repaired. It caused me excruciating pain, and the only thing he could do was, he said, to amputate. And so I secured a plot right here and buried that leg with gave it a little funeral service. And you might ask yourself why that would do something. It might sound foolish to you, but you see, I believe that on the judgment day, my body will be resurrected from the grave. And at that time, my body will be made whole again and unite with my soul. And I was just planning for the future. So anyway, I lived to the age of 87, and I died in 1950. My parents, if you take a walk among the tombstones, you might notice they're buried right over there by Father Scherbring, Arnold and Anna Mary Van Handel. And you know, I mentioned the Zimmerman family and the Kintz family. Kintz, Zimmerman, they all found this a good place to raise their family and to settle. As a matter of fact, the first mayor of Sublimity was a Kintz in the early 1900s when the town was incorporated. And so I lived a good life, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that I had and for my wonderful family. And I appreciate living in this beautiful place. And thank you for stopping by and listening to my story.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm very grateful to have lived in such a wonderful community. What year is it now? Today? 20,000. Wow. That explains things. I'm noticing a lot of houses and a lot less open land. I noticed over in the park that they don't allow horses there, but I did see some horses go by on the street there. But I'd like to thank you all for stopping by. If you have any questions, I'll answer them.